Hi, welcome back to Missy's Enchanted Channel. Well, today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I have a True Tales of Ghostly Encounters. And what I want to do is I'm going to read this whole book, not in one shot. I'm going to do like a series, take a couple of stories and read them to you. So this would be series one. It's going to take a little bit of time, but we'll get through it. It's just something a little bit different instead of doing the tarot readings. And I used to do scary stories, but this is like ghostly encounters. So I don't know, I just wanted to do something different and fun. So yeah. And this is by Andrew Honigman from the files of Fate magazine. So yeah. All right. The True Tales of Ghostly Encounters. And they start off with messages, apparitions, warnings, unfinished business, children and ghosts, visions from long ago, companions, permanent occupations, restless spirits, curtain calls, and blessings. And here's the introduction. What happens after we die? This is one of the great questions of human existence, like that of other questions. Why are we here? It has no single accepted answer. For many, the survival or rebirth of the individual is a deeply held matter of religious faith. For others, the notion of an immortal soul is nonsense. The wisest religious and scientific thinkers agree that they may never mutually satisfactory answers to such questions. Faith either makes sense or it does not, depending on one's disposition, and science has little to say one way or the other with any great confidence. Is there any way out of this impasse? When considering this question, it is important to note that many millions of people, from the beginning of recorded history, have reported significant experiences that gave them reasons to believe in the survival of the individual after death. Hold on. All right. Departed souls have contacted the living, have been seen and heard, and have given reports on their condition. Persons on the brink of death or beyond have returned from information on what they saw and experienced. Past lives have been recalled and sometimes verified with astonishing accuracy. Fate magazine was founded in 1948 to provide a forum for extraordinary experiences of all kinds. The first issue features Kenneth Arnold's report on his flying saucer sighting of the previous year, the sighting that marked the beginning of the UFO era. Contributions from reading have always featured prominently in the magazine content, beginning in the earliest days with a section called True Mystic Experiences. In 1954, the editors introduced My Proof of Survival, a departed dedicated to readers' reports bearing on the subject of life after death. In the 49 years since its debut, Fate has published more than 2,000 stories of this nature, all attested to be true by their authors. The Fate archives represent a tremendous resource for anyone interested in the question of afterlife survival, whether looking for evidence or simply curious about what people believe and why. Some of the best stories from our archives are presented in this book. So it sounds like fun, right, guys? Something different? All right, we're going to be starting with the, first chapter, messages, communication from the other side. All right, what do the departed have to say to the living? Sometimes the simple fact that a loved one is able to communicate from the other side is enough. In these stories, Fate readers reported messages of love, encouragement, and hope from the hereafter. There are also some humorous accounts indicating the dead aren't about taking offense at statements by the survivors. These communications take varied and sometimes unexpected forms, everything from personal visits to written messages to levitating objects and more. And we start with Night of the Living. A family friend of 40 years died on December 3rd, 1993. His name was Joe G., and he lived in San Antonio, Arizona. After his memorial service, I spent time at his condo packing and throwing things out. As I weeded through his possessions, I apologized out loud to Joe for having to do it. Between tears and laughter, I teased him about how much of a pack rat he had become. In his drawers and closets were every bag and box that had come his way in the 2.5 years he had lived there. 2 boxes in particular were just the right size for packing dishes, so I packed them up and left them for lunch. Knowing that only the property management company and I had access to the condo helped me reason away what happened next. Upon returning, I found that on each of the boxes were letters in black magic marker written in a shaky scrawl that spelled out the word living. Well, I thought I must have missed that when I packed the boxes. After more packing and cleaning, 8 o'clock rolled around and I left for dinner. I couldn't chase away my anxiety about returning after Doc to stay there by myself. But I went back anyway. The same 2 boxes were still in the hallway, but someone or something had written living 2 more times. Now there were 4 words that I hadn't seen before. As much as I tried to convince myself that those words were there before I left, I didn't believe it. I still had the feeling I was not alone, so I grabbed my things and stayed at a motel 7 miles down the road. I headed back to the condo the next morning thinking how silly I had been to spend the extra money. I was sure it was just my imagination. That morning the sun was shining through the windows and the place looked really cheery. Everything was just where I left it. Heaving a sigh of relief, I put down my purse and walked to the center of the living room to finish packing. What I saw next took my breath away. On 6 of the boxes I found the word living written very clearly in black magic marker. I knew every single one of those boxes had been unmarked because I had examined them thoroughly after the previous day's skid. I truly believe Joe was there to let me know that even though he didn't get to say goodbye in person, he was still near and still alive. And that's from L.M. Nickerson, Sedona, Arizona, January 1998. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. And now we go on to Don't Worry. I was born on September 13th, 1949, without hope of survival. Low birth rate babies have a difficult time, often living only weeks or months. My mother was 6 months pregnant when I was born, and I weighed only 1 pound, 7 ounces. The medical professionals were not encouraged, saying that no baby had ever survived at that hospital weighing so little. One morning, my mother was lying in bed at the hospital, depressed and worried. She didn't want to believe the doctors and nurses. Then 2 men sat on the edge of the bed. One was her father, the other a handsome man who she had seen only in photographs, was her father-in-law. Both of these men were dead. Her father died 2 years before I was born, and her father-in-law died when my father was 10. She told me she wasn't afraid. I was surrounded by a peaceful feeling, something I couldn't explain. My grandfather told her, "Don't worry or listen to your doctors. They are wrong. Your baby will survive and grow up to be a wonderful daughter and beautiful child." The doctors and nurses noticed a change in her attitude after this. To their mind, she wasn't facing facts. They explained that the odds were 1,000,000 to 1 I would survive. Even if I did, they told her, I would have many health problems. They even told her to pray that I would die so I wouldn't suffer. My mother smiled and kept her positive attitude. I kept fighting, and the doctors shook their heads in amazement. Mother left the hospital and walked back every day to stare at me through the glass wall. Back then, you weren't allowed to hold a baby. Parents couldn't even enter the premature section of the nursery. I gained weight slowly. The tubes were removed, one by one, and I began to look like a normal baby. Mother told me she could have held me in the palm of her hand when I was born. On Christmas Day, after more than 3 months in the hospital, I was brought home. I weighed 5 pounds. My grandfathers delivered a message, and my mother believed them. And that was from Nancy Dukey Dinafio, Glenville, New York, February 1994. And now, the Doxology. My mom and dad visited me in California in the mid-1960s. I took them to a New Thought church. It was their first experience with this kind of service, and they both loved it, especially the hymn called the Doxology. Having been Catholic all their lives, they had never heard the song before. In the early 1970s, when I moved back home with them, they used to love to sing that song together. God, if I can spit it out. Sorry, guys. My dad developed cancer and died within 6 months. My mom lived 5 weeks longer and then died of a broken heart. They had been married for over 60 years, and despite their advanced age, their passing was very painful for me. 1 year later, I was visiting my sister in the Bahamas. On the flight over, I became very lonely for my parents. I prayed that I would be given a sign that they could contact me from the other side. I was walking alone on the island 3 days later. It was a beautiful day, and I was enjoying the sun and cool breeze. I heard organ music coming from the woods. I walked to the music and saw a tiny church in the middle of nowhere. I entered the building and saw an elderly lady sitting at an organ. We smiled at each other and I sat down. She played a number of hymns. Then she looked at me and said, "This hymn is for you." I was shocked when she started playing the Doxology. Mom and Dad's favorite hymn was played for me on a remote island in the Bahamas. I knew they were sending me a message. That's Danny L. Galvin, Scranton, Pennsylvania, January 2001. All right, I'm going to read 2 more and that's it. Temper. Following the death of my wife, Florence, I decided to move to a smaller home and to rent the house we had occupied. In June 1977, my friend Betty Newhouse was helping me pack for the move. I placed a small figurine in a box on the table. The box was about 2/3 full and the figurine lay about 4 inches from the top. Several minutes later, as we continued to pack, I said to Betty, "I wonder what Florence would say if she knew I was renting this house to people of the blank religion." This was a religion whose teachings were at odds with those of my wife's church. Immediately after I asked this question, something hit the floor with a loud crash. It was the figurine. There was no way it could have fallen on its own from the box on the table because, as I said, it lay a good 4 inches below the top of the box. As we continued to pack, I mused on the memory of Florence's quick temper. During our life together, if she had an object in her hand when something happened or was said to upset her, the object was given a quick pitch to the floor. Apparently, her transition did not change her temper. James M. O'Neill, McDonough, Ohio, July 1982. And this is the last one I'm going to read. Father's love and blessing. Many years ago, at a time in my life when I was worried and depressed, I decided to make the 360-mile drive to visit my only aunt, Jenny Schaffer Hull, who lived in Lacona, a suburb of Jamestown, New York, to ask for advice. The only person I knew in that locality was Aunt Jenny. After I had poured out my troubles, she asked if I would be willing to go to Lily Dale, the spiritualist community, to get a reading from a medium. She had heard that many persons found help there. Although it was only 13 miles from her home, she never had been there. There was no way anyone in Lily Dale could know anything of my life. Today, Lily Dale is widely known. It was not very large in August 1949 when we walked through the grounds, wondering which cottage to stop at. Finally, we selected a small white house. With shaking fingers, I pressed the doorbell. Hold on. A pleasant woman about 30 years old opened the door and asked me to step in. All I wanted was an answer to something that was troubling me. So when I asked her if she could read for me in what she charged, her answer frightened me. "I do not charge," she said, "but I will bring you messages from the dead, and you can leave on the table whatever you think it was worth." I had not bargained for communication with the dead. We were ushered into a small room, furnished only with a small table and 3 chairs. I sat across from the medium, and my aunt took her place alongside me. The medium took both my hands in hers and closed her eyes. After a few seconds, she started jerking. "Please be very quiet," she said. "The messages are not very loud." First, my grandfather Michael Sheffer came. He said he wanted me to know he was well and happy. Next came my grandmother Adeline. In life, she was stern and outspoken, and what she said did not surprise me, for it was the sort of thing she would say. You made your bed, now lie in it. Even though I recognized my grandmother's characteristic sharp tongue, still it did not convince me that the dead was speaking. The next message I received did. Suddenly, the medium jerked so hard I hardly could hold on to her hands. As she quieted, she said, "Here is a very young, handsome man. He says he is your father and he has something he wants to give you. He could not give you this before, for he had left the earth before you came. His gift is a father's love and blessing." I started to cry, for the fact of my father's death was absolutely correct. He had been a bookkeeper in his father's laundry, and one day a heavy roll of paper fell from a high storage platform and struck him on the head. He regained consciousness only long enough to call my mother's name before he died. My earthly troubles seemed to pale in the light of the monumental knowledge that the dead are very much alive. I was now ready to leave, but suddenly the medium turned to Aunt Jenny. Her first husband, John Sheffer, had been a bridge contractor. He went out early one morning to see that everything was in order for the men to start working on the bridge. He stepped on a loose plank, crashed to the pavement below, and died instantly. A year after his death, my aunt married again, then began to wonder if she had broken faith with John. Should she have remained single? We learned that afternoon that those above see us and know when we worry. John's message was, "Don't worry, you did exactly right in getting married again." Then Aunt Jenny started to cry and we left. But we made one mistake. When we stopped to put our money on the table, we did not ask our reader's name. If she had business cards on the table, we were too upset to notice. For 15 years, my husband Kenneth took me every year to Lilydale, but we never did find her again. And that's Ruth Ann Bixler, Halifax, Pennsylvania, January 1972. Wow, these stories are really incredible. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I do believe life after death and, all that stuff. And to read some of these stories, you can tell that there is. So, I don't know. What do you guys think about it? Let me know in the comments below. But I do hope you guys enjoyed this. And we have like a lot of series to go through because we got like a lot of stories. And we have different topics on them. So, yeah. Let me know if you like this, and I'll talk to you guys in a couple of days. And as always, thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days. Bye, guys. Keep smiling, stay safe, and have fun. And as always, thank you. Bye.